Minorea is here to help disadvantaged businesses grow and provide resources. And we are niched in the construction industry. This particular webinar has a lot of elements to take within that industry. But overall, if you want to be understanding how to strategize your company, this will apply as well. So our first webinar for this year is related to how to grow. It is time to grow. 2023 should be a year where if any company invests time in the thinking process, you'll be able to effectively grow and scale. So let's see what what we are going to be highlighting for the webinar. Before we start the webinar, I do want to mention certain areas of communication and how we're going to go about this webinar. If you look at the tools on the bottom, or usually it's on the bottom of your screen, you'll see an area where there's questions and answers, Q&A, and then there's another area where there's a chat box. So the chat box, we're going to be utilizing the chat box to connect and communicate if in case there's any technical difficulties or audio issues. Mauricio Diaz, that's here with us, he's going to be helping us answering any of the questions that you might have pertaining to technical difficulties. Now, if you have any questions throughout these slides and throughout the presentation, you can add the question on the Q&A section, and we'll make sure that by the end of the presentation, we'll take a look at that question and try to answer it within this presentation. All right, so moving forward, and I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a throat issue, so sorry about that, if in case I interrupt my conversation because of a cough or something. The overview of this webinar is to abstract certain elements of your growth plan. Essentially, you really want to make sure that you develop a strategic growth plan where you're going to be able to abide by, and this type of planning, annual planning, will help you with making sure that your team and you have a very clear direction of where you're going. And it'll also help you with opportunities to access to capital because you'll be able to explain where you want to go. However, this doesn't explain everything about a growth plan. We don't have enough time. But towards the end of the presentation, we are going to give you some events that are going to be happening in the near future, where we are going to go and dig deep into this opportunity of specific. So one of the most important elements is to make sure that you stay focused, right? So we're going to talk about how to stay focused, identifying when and how to delegate, create execution metrics, and identify implementing methods through these executions. So let's get started. Why? Why do we have to stay focused? Well, I usually try to implement little knickknacks that sort of make sense, but they're funny. You find it funny as well. But as Amin says, usually we say that we want to stay focused, but we are trained, and the majority of us are raised to multitask. So the more you want to stay focused, sometimes the more you sort of want to be doing stuff. And why? Because we're usually very want to be very productive, but sometimes it ends up being counterproductive if you don't really focus on what you're doing. So it is very important, and even Forbes has explained the importance of having focus within your business. In general, that's a problem, but within our within our business and our culture and our production, it can become a major factor and a major problem. And sometimes it's not the team, sometimes it's the actual owner or the partners or the leadership that's going through that. And as you know, if leaders don't take responsibility and show through example what you're supposed to do and through communication, then the team tends to follow the same steps. So Forbes explains that most businesses are presented with numerous market opportunities. For instance, skills like web design, development, and sales expertise can address the need of many segments in different industries. However, startups and service providers risk performance uh, well enough in many areas, but not exceptionally well in any. So basically, you might be able to perform or do what a company might need, but if you're not specific to your niche, then you might not be the, the person indicated for the project. And if you oversell yourself or try to grasp so much more than what you are able to handle or your team is able to handle, you can really ruin the relationship with that particular business or your reputation as a. So you got to be very careful in those arenas when um, when you're deciding what type of service or product you're going to be offering, and this means even to the existing businesses that might have years and years, but if you feel like there's a ceiling you have reached, maybe it's time to revamp and sort of narrow your focus and service or industry targets to accommodate your specialty, what you're good at. So it's important to evaluate, reflect, and gather as much information from your business to identify your capacity. Also, important to investigate who you really want to do business and if you provide value to that particular company or person, right? And to identify, we're going to talk about how we are going to be identifying a certain niche uh, that that you might be able to excel. That conversation is actually going to go along every slide that we go about because it is important to understand where you're really good at and then maybe and possibly delegate or not even include that particular service where you're not. And we're finally going to talk about how to plan and execute accordingly. Well, these are elements that you're supposed to do. Like I mentioned, we're not going to be able to complete everything that's involved in this arena, but we're going to be able to cover as much as we can with the time that we have. So let's talk about stay focused. Why is it important? If we took a look at the first bullet point, it was explaining how you had to really reflect and then gather as much information from your. And the reason why it's so important to reflect is because if you don't reflect, you past performances, maybe 2022's productivity, what happened and what didn't happen. If you go back and reflect on all of that, you'll be able to make a decision of what you need to do and what you don't. And upon that, you can create measures and effectively build a plan where you're going to actually or on a corner. So it's important to try and gather as much information from your company. Why am I saying that? usually companies should be having as much all the information necessary, but there are companies or businesses, small businesses out there that perform on a project and they fail to take pictures of before and after. They fail to write down what were the challenges and what were the solutions you presented. If you have years not really registering that information, it is very easy to get. It's and there's certain projects that could align with the solution you presented in the past. So so this might take time for companies that don't have this information. This might take time for you to go over and try to go through your history of pictures and history of what really happened and who's the client and how big of a project was it. But if you have those tools, you'll be able to really communicate your process and understand where you stand as a company and its capacity, right? So it's not only past performance, it's past experience, all your team skills. Sometimes we adopt a team member, we interview them and seem to be good candidates, but we really don't know their history, their experience. We might see it in a resume, but those are just two or three sentences that don't really explain your team member's capability, right? And that team member's capability could go a long way on a project, especially if they were previous estimators, previous project managers, previous leaders, office leaders, or even superintendents, supervisors, all these, or even labor team members that have past experience through other companies. You might be able to collect all that information and sort of bring into the table skills that you might have not thought you had. So it's important to sort of maybe get a nice lunch and learn type of day where you can bring some sandwiches or burgers and sit down and just get to know everybody and see what they offer. Technical capacities. What I mean by technical capacities is anything that has to do with bonding capacity, insurance limits, maybe capital reserves, licenses. Those are all the technical capacities that you want to include. OSHA clearances or OSHA standards and any of that you really want to bring into a file and eventually all your marketing website and your capability statements and some of the advertisement announcements. And then anything that has to do with recognition, certifications, awards, anything that's gonna sort of where you can toot your horn and make your company look very professional and very talented. And then you want to go to the other area where you now you sort of collected everything that you've done, every skillful at, every um, so your value, but now you sort of want to go back and maybe and make sure to write all of this, right? So besides collecting all the data and all the information and all the pictures and videos, all that good stuff, you probably want to also go back and write things down. Write down all the advantages, the team skills, the recognitions, all of it. Put it in paper in a Word document, And then also write all your weaknesses, your limitations, your lack of skills, maybe your challenges. If you do those two, then you'll be able to review and reflect, and then see what approach you can do for 2023. And then by doing that, then now you could answer these questions. And it's important that that would be a second step after gathering all this information. So the questions would be who would want to do business with us? What are, you know, why are you so special? Have you communicated all your advantages, skills, recognitions to, to about your business to others? Sometimes we have all of this, and people find out once they come to the office. But what if you have a particular company or a person that's looking at your website and you really don't have everything that you have, or your capability statement, brochure? So it's important to include that. um, Another question that's very important, and maybe that can be one of your goals for this year, is what have you done about all the weaknesses, limitations, lack of skills, and challenges you have? You really want to do something about it. You want to be able to empower your team. You want to be able to acquire certain knowledge that's going to be able to help you later on in projects or as a business. Are you measuring our time, our marketing investments? Are we measuring profitability on products or services? Even if we're measuring, sometimes they make us measure, right? Especially in construction, you have to provide like a detailed specification of all the uh, materials and hours that you're investing, and then there's a profit margin that sometimes you have to put in. But is this margin effective? Is it set for you to scale, or is it just sustaining your company? It's important to find that out as well. So let's talk about delegation, delegating. And the construction industry sometimes can be for disadvantaged businesses, either through cultural barriers or maybe, loving your business and knowing that that's your people feel it like it's your baby, your family member. Sometimes it's hard to delegate. And I always hear a lot of contractors that are saying, "Oh, no one can do what I know. There's so much uh, involved that I can't train them. They're not going to do it right." Well, those expressions are making your company from growing, and they're reducing your talent. Um, you're not empowering anyone. Just remember that if you could do it, anyone else can do it. Maybe it took you this amount of years, but maybe because it took you this amount of years, you'll be able to teach them how to reduce that time investment. Maybe you can give them cheat sheets. Maybe you can give them tools. Maybe you can, and before you know it, they might be even better than you. And you want team members that are better than you. You want to identify team members that know more than what you know, because they'll be able to contribute to that business. If you're worried about them leaving, then you should be worried about not empowering them and not giving them that information and not giving them the right tools to succeed. And that's a very, very common situation with a lot of businesses, not only in the construction industry, but a lot of businesses that are out there that you feel like you know everything, and everybody can't do exactly what you can do. And it's true. I mean, if you try to delegate something at that moment, and it's maybe the first time or the second time they've tried it out, they're not going to perform the same way as you do. So it might need a little more care, a little more surveillance, or making sure that you're right next to them, trying to give them some tips of what to do. But consider this an investment. If that takes you a year, and that particular team member is now there 4 years, or even if there's a team member that's an extra year there, um, at least you have a complete year where you were able to delegate this task, and now you've been able to grow due to that. So please don't stomp your growth because it's hard for you to delegate. However, I do know that there's times you're not going to delegate a task or a really big project to a um, that just started, a team member that just started, and even if they have experience, you really don't want to do that because they don't know your procedures, the systems. It's important that they go through a training process and a training time to really for them to really feel comfortable to be on their own, and they'll probably want that too. So it's important to do and identify certain areas of when your team member is ready to perform on their own or delegate something that's a little more um, meaty and you know, with more responsibilities. You got to take a look at skills. Um, you also have to consider and have really good communication of their likes and dislikes. So they might be able to do it and they might be able to do it really good, but maybe that's just too boring for them because they want to be challenged a little more. So you've got to have those conversations as a, what do you think? And then employees need to understand, or team members need to understand that it's mutual as well. Like it's not everything is gonna be fun. You know, like for example, I love networking. I love talking to people. There's other people that don't like doing that at all. But once I have to sit down and start sending emails, that might not be a very easy task for me to do because I'm out and about, and then sitting me down and getting me structured to send emails is very hard for me, and it might be hard for others. But it's something that's very important for a business development representative, for a sales representative, for a outreach representative. It's part of the role, part of the process. So they have to understand as well that if you don't dislike the task, maybe if you do things at a certain point, you perform the way they like explain to them how to perform, and you exceed at that performance, maybe then we can talk about delegating the things that you might like. You also have to identify cultural alignment. Uh, if you haven't identified your company culture, uh, then you might have a lot of turnover on your in and the reason is that you don't structure your core values the right way. Um, these team members don't see the value in staying. They don't see your picture. They don't see the opportunities of growth within that. And the majority of uh, people, especially when it comes to positions that are high level positions, they really do want to make sure that they can grow. If you don't present that, then you lose them. So it's important to sit down and structure your core values and understand what your culture is. And upon those core values and your culture, you'll be able to make a decision and have a good team member that's probably going to stick with you a lot more than what you're facing. Potential for growth as well, like I mentioned, they have to see your potential. Maybe you don't want to grow. Maybe you want to stay, like a local mm, handyman or something like that. If it's okay with that, with them, you are gonna find people that just like are amount of money, stability. Um, but you have to define it and you have to show it and explain it to them and communicate the process of what your business is being or where you want it to go. Uh, you got to make sure that they are committed, they're good team players. If it's necessary according to the role you're delegating. You also want to delegate to technology. Sometimes that's first, then the team members because it's low cost, and hiring employees might be, expensive. Payroll might be one of the most overhead. But technology, on the other hand, if you have, like, for example, track anything performance, you need to um, sort of automate a repetitive procedure. You have to communicate marketing. You have to have this internal process where they can take you step by step, expose your business. There's so many things that now technology can do, and I highly recommend you to go to this link. And I forgot to mention that all the participants, all the registrants are going to receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentation or the presentation and the video, the video that we're recording. But once you have the presentation, the PDF will have hyperlinked uh, these hyperlinked resources. So click on it, and this will take you to our YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel, this particular webinar sort of talked about certain tools that a lot of businesses don't know about and that you manage and stream. You also want to consider professionals, even when you're small. I know maybe you can't afford a lot of them at the time when you're small, but you can cultivate a good relationship with them and then explain your big picture. And if you explain your big picture and you really get along with a lawyer, accountant, especially the ones that are focused in the construction industry, if you're a contractor, um, anyone that has to do with, but there's a lot of professionals, business consultants, risk mitigators. There's a lot of professionals. So if you get involved and try to network with them and be on top of them, maybe refer certain companies that are at that level, then you could have a lot of advantages because they can afford to your company what you don't know, right? They're serving other industries and companies that are high up there, and that's where you want to be. So they'll be able to help you with that information. So um, don't underestimate the power of relationships, and don't put that off. It's very important to connect with professionals. Save you time, they can save you money, they can save you risk, they can eliminate hardship, they can eliminate time. So really do consider and talk to them, let them know where you're at. Then, of course, subcontractors. For construction, a lot of businesses out there are used to subbing out work, but there's not. It's not only for construction; it's for anything. Within your internal procedures for a contractor, but it's also for any type of industry. Subcontracting a lot of um, roles will help you in many levels. One, maybe they can contribute to the quality of your service or your product. They can include you in different opportunities. You might be able to increase your capacity and bid on projects that are a little higher than what you could take on, and they can support, or you can mutually support your growth, and later on sort of have potential joint venture or something like that. We're going with the big guys. So it's very important to factor in these three options of delegation to be able to scale up. Because if you want to do everything, you're going to stay where you're at for years and years to come. And then by the time you want to retire, then you're going to be stuck because you don't have as much time as you had at this moment, you know. So let's talk about execution metrics. What is that? Um, we've heard of it. Sometimes when we do proposals, say your past performance metrics, you haven't included, you need to include it. But in reality, what metrics is measuring. In reality, it comes from measuring. So any any measuring that you can do within your business is um, it will give you information to make a choice for the future. So it's quantitative measured data you need to track to identify whatever it is that you want to track or identify. Productivity, effectiveness, progress, accountability. Why do businesses do that? Why is it so important within the company? Corporate companies are always all about that. And it's important because, like I mentioned on the other phrase before on the second slide, if you don't measure, your plan wasn't effective. You won't be able to see if you executed according to. So metrics are used to drive improvement and help businesses focus their people and resources on what's important to them, right? So once you identify your why, and like I mentioned, go back to our YouTube channel. There's another video that talks about how to identify your why. And once you identify your why and where you want to go and how big you want to be, then you'll be able to see how you can measure that. And how? Okay, this is the tricky part. How do you measure? How do you go about measuring? And it's all about trying to be as simple as you can. The more complex these measures are, the harder it is to change these habits for team members and for us too. So there's differences in regards of KPIs, which are key performance indicators. It's a measuring factor, and then there's a difference between. So it all boils down, and I can give you an example of on the sites of what metrics. So metrics are very popular within performance. So if you want to be able to perform on a project, they're gonna ask you, like whenever you get on a big project, technical proposal will ask for that. Schedules and your past performance metrics, and then how you're gonna be. That's where you create those metrics. So what's the overall goal and how you're gonna get to the overall goal. Now the KPIs are sort of like your inner. So KPI measures anything that has to do with the performance of a person. Ensure that that role, like a sales representative, you measure their outcome through the sales they bring in, right? So if you have a person that has a role of a sales, let's say it's a dealership, they're productive because they were able to sell like 5 cars. That's a good, but it's they're able to sell a minimum, let's say a minimum of 5 cars in a month, and mm, then that's very simple, right? But what if you're um, have a person that does project management? How can you um, measure that? So there's different areas where you can measure and factor in, but one of the simple ones is. All right, so now go digging a little deeper into understanding what the difference is between KPIs, metrics, And then there's also key results. So metrics is overall. You can have performance metrics that can be as simple as, maybe the construction project. You can put in the time and date and the amount. You can put in the past performance, the description, the solutions. That could be a performance metric. You can complicate it a little more. Just make sure not complicate it as much because, like I mentioned, it's gonna be harder to perform on. Now we have there's options for financial key performance indicators, marketing, sales key performance indicators, and in reality, there's no right and wrong. The only way that you're gonna be wrong is because you weren't able to execute properly, and maybe you were too aggressive, you were too vague on your explanation or on your procedures. So that's where you're going to identify. And the only way you're going to be able to identify is once you try it out. It's like designing your own company. It's amazing. Don't they'll give you will give you get tips of how to do it, but in reality, it lies on you and your team of how you're going to design your. So I have like a screenshot of this, and I need to put in the track that particular video that I saw, but this was very, very simple. This is sort of understanding how you're going to measure, right? How you're going to indicate your key performance. So you got to go by these four factors: measure, target, source, and frequency. And then you got to understand what type of key performance indicators or measurements you want to be do, if it's a progress of a person and the role of that, if it's just, the efficiency of a CRM, the efficiency of a certain um, tool, marketing tool or advertisement, and then anything that you're changing now, which involves the last one. So now, going back, this slide might look somewhat similar. Identify implementing methods. So we're going back to delegation, right? Once you identify these key performance indicators and the measuring factors, that you develop metrics for your companies and goals and how to execute them, then you'll identify how you're going to implement. How are you going to be doing that? The key performance, exactly what that is basically saying if you do this, this should be the result, and this is how we're going to calculate the result. And then after a quarter or a month, we're going to come back and see if you were able to perform on all of this. So all of this is actually the implementation of the overall goal. So how sometimes a team member cannot perform on everything that they have. It's just too much. So where do you go next? Well, efficiency. Try to identify tech tools or technology tools, platforms that are going to support his his um, his tasks and his responsibilities. So if you identify a team that can execute the amount of time they can dedicate and what's the amount of time that they'll need to do to perform that particular task, then you go to either subbing this option out, implementing efficiency through technology, or hiring a professional to give you some to do it better, or maybe that professional can execute it, and even though it might be more expensive on the long run, it's cheaper because your team member is focusing on what they're talented in instead of trying to guess and find out what they need to do on something. So, and that pretty much boils it down. Have any questions? Anything that you guys want to include. Now's the time. We pretty much finished our presentation. So,
In the chat box,
the chat box. Oh,
one question. What impact does good planning have? How long does it take to see results?
what impact does good planning have, and how long does it take to see results? It all depends on what industry you are. There's different factors. It depends on you as a owner or leader on the leaders. Depends on the industry. This depends on the size of your company. When you're talking about planning, if it's a startup, there's there's gonna be a more a growth process that's a little more expensive because it's a startup. But sometimes there's companies that have been in business for 10 years, and for those 10 years they have not done any planning. They organically got their business, and they're why? Because they're good at their business, but challenges that they haven't been able to grow, right? They stay in the same. Maybe they go a little higher certain years and a little lower certain years, but maybe you can't hit or go through a certain ceiling of revenue or of projects, and that that is because there isn't any planning, there isn't any reflection of why this happened and why it didn't, um, and there's no goals that are set, or at least if they are set, they don't know how to measure the outcome of that goal. So sometimes you have like really aggressive goals. Oh yeah, we're gonna double our revenue for the end of the year, and you tell this to your team members and they're like, yeah, that's good, we're going to do that, but they keep on doing, and everybody keeps on doing the same thing. So there's not going to be really a really good outcome if you don't push, if you push yourself, if you don't push your team members, if you don't get outside of your shell and your box. So planning is very important because it's the start of understanding how much work you need to do to get to that goal. And like I mentioned, that growth, the growth and the results, you're going to be able to see it the 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 more you get into implementing whatever you planned. There's also people, not many, but also people that plan and they lack an implement a really uh, good scale. And then within the construct, even if you were in the within the construction industry, like that niche, you can be a general contractor and spread yourself so thin, just targeting a certain everybody. You're letting you want to get certified for everything. You see LAX is having a good project. You see Caltrans is having a lot of work, and you go to all of them, and you reach out to them. They tell you to get certified. You get certified on all of them, but then you don't know what's next. You don't, and you're just grabbing everything that presents you. So you're basically going along with waves instead of you handling the waves or maneuvering and directing. Right, let me see. I think there's another one.
Other one in the Q&A.
Uh, it says, do you have a way to evaluate and determine who your ideal customer is, or how to determine your whenever you get Tim, whenever you get this copy, I believe there's a link, and I included the link, and there it's stay focused, be strategic, and it was one of the first slides that I introduced, and that one talks about that webinar that was done last year. It talks about how to narrow your focus, evaluate your customers, and identify who's the right one to to identify. It goes back to you and where you want to be, where you want to take this. But I've had customers that we've done strategic planning. They think they want to do public works projects. They think they want to do, projects for schools, and then after, once we do all the strategy planning, they realize that they really don't want to do it. the that direction, it was sort of like an idea of being able to create cash flow, but that was sort of gonna take them and steer them to a very different way, and and they just saved a lot of headaches just because they went through that process of thinking their approach. Now they're just investing and working with their own properties and selling them. But that's a very different. See the direction in investing, revamping, and selling, compared to working with quasi government entities in contracts. Very, very different. But if you want a little more information, we are having some events, and if you want to dig like really deep into, how to do the metrics and how to do your planning, we are going to have. We're trying to have, now that we're out of the pandemic, we're this year we are going to have be more involved in events that are present. So we are going to have an event on February 8th is the Spanish one. We're trying to do Spanish and English. So Wednesday, February 22nd, there's another webinar that we're going to be having that's going to talk about some of the, that's not Wednesday. So you put in the Spanish ones, right? So let's see, Thursday, February the 23rd. 23rd, we're going to have a webinar on understanding opportunities for access to capital, including employee retention credit. Thursday, on March 23rd, we're going to do building capacity for $1 million contracts workshop. That's the one I sort of wanted to explain. We're going to have, on March 23rd, we're going to have a workshop. It's a full day workshop that's going to be talking about how to do contracts, how to build your capacity and build your infrastructure to be able to get those contracts and how to get them, and everything that you might be wanting to understand a little further. We're gonna talk about it in that workshop. So I highly encourage you to be on top of the emails that we sent out, and you'll eventually see this one in the near future. Maybe to talk more about strategy. Okay, yes, Tim. Yeah, we can talk about that. Um, we can definitely talk about that, and then you decide whether you want to do a one-on-one type of thing, or if you're going to steer more towards the workshop. Usually, right now we're steering more towards the workshops, but eventually we do have, we are working on some membership programs, uh, and help you through the process, uh, to the point where you can get those big contracts. All right, so I think that's it. Any other? It doesn't seem like we have any other question. Anything you want to mention, Mauricio?
No, that's it.
Have a great day. Thank you for participating, and we'll see each other next month or maybe in the near future.